I had just finished my morning coffee when a notification quietly appeared on my phone. Normally, I wouldn't pay much attention to it, but something about it made me pause. It was from the security app connected to my new house. I tapped it without thinking too much, and that's when I saw her. My daughter-in-law, Samantha, standing right outside the front door of my newly purchased Victorian home on Maplewood Avenue. She wasn't looking around like a visitor or hesitating like someone unsure. She looked comfortable, confident, like she had every right to be there, and then, without any hesitation, she reached into her purse, pulled out a silver key, and slid it straight into the lock like she belonged inside. That was the exact moment I stopped breathing for a second, because what she did next told me everything I needed to know. The key didn't turn. She frowned slightly, almost annoyed, then adjusted her hand and tried again. Still nothing. This time she pushed harder, twisting it with force, but the lock didn't move. I leaned back slowly in my chair, my heartbeat steady, watching every second of it unfold on my screen. She stepped back, clearly confused now, staring at the door as if it had betrayed her. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that just 24 hours earlier I had changed every single lock in that house and installed cameras at every entrance. At the time, it felt like an expensive precaution, but in that exact moment it became something else entirely. It became proof that my instincts had been right all along. Samantha tried the key again, this time with visible frustration. When it failed, she immediately reached for her phone and called Eric. Her movements became sharper, more aggressive, pointing at the door, shaking her head, pacing slightly. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I didn't need to. I could already imagine the story forming in her mind. Maybe she would say the locks were changed without notice. Maybe she would claim something was wrong with the property. Maybe she would twist it into something dramatic to make herself look like the victim. But none of that mattered anymore, because the truth was already right in front of me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was intentional. And for the first time, I wasn't guessing anymore. I was watching it happen in real time. Because the hardest truth to accept is this: betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the people you trust the most. And sometimes, by the time you finally see it clearly, it's already gone much further than you ever imagined. My name is Helen Montgomery. I am 64 years old, and just a few months ago I buried my husband David after his long and painful battle with heart disease. For nearly 40 years we built a life together in a quiet Pennsylvania town. It wasn't extravagant, but it was steady, peaceful, and full of small routines that gave everything meaning. Morning coffee together, evening walks. Quiet dinners where we didn't even need to speak much to understand each other. And when he was gone, all of that disappeared in a way that felt impossible to explain. The silence he left behind wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. It filled every room, every moment, every thought. Even weeks after his passing, I would still find myself setting 2 plates at the table without realizing it. I would catch myself halfway through and just stand there, staring, remembering that he wasn't coming back. That kind of grief changes you. It makes you slower, softer, more vulnerable in ways you don't even notice at first. And when you're in that state, you start leaning on people more than you normally would. You accept help without questioning it. You trust more easily. And sometimes that's exactly when people begin to take advantage of you without you even realizing it. After David passed, my son Eric started calling more often. At first, it felt comforting. His voice was softer, more attentive than usual. He checked in regularly, asking how I was doing, offering to help with things around the house. Samantha started visiting more too. She would bring food, offer to clean, sit with me and talk. On the surface, it looked like care, it looked like support, and in my state, I didn't question it. I told myself they were just trying to be there for me. I told myself this was what family was supposed to look like, but looking back now, I see it differently. Not all help comes from love. Sometimes it comes from opportunity. And sometimes, the closer someone gets to you, the easier it becomes for them to slowly step into places they were never meant to be. One evening, Eric sat across from me at the kitchen table. His tone was calm, careful, almost rehearsed. He told me I shouldn't be alone in such a big, aging house anymore. He said Dad would have wanted me to start fresh somewhere new. Samantha nodded quickly, adding that they could help me make smart decisions with the insurance money David had left behind. She spoke gently, but there was something in her eyes that didn't match her tone. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't concern. It was something else, something calculating, something focused. And in that moment, a quiet voice inside me whispered something I didn't want to hear: be careful. At the time, I ignored it. Because when you're grieving, you don't want to question the people closest to you. You want to believe they're there for the right reasons. You want to believe their intentions are pure. But sometimes that belief becomes the very thing that blinds you to what's really happening. A few weeks later, I found the house on Maplewood Avenue. The moment I saw it, something inside me shifted in a way I hadn't felt since before David got sick. It was a beautiful Victorian, tall windows, a wide wraparound porch, 6 large bedrooms, each one filled with character and history. It didn't just look like a house. It felt like possibility. It felt like a second chance. I could already imagine family gatherings, laughter echoing through the hallways, grandchildren running up and down the stairs. For the first time in months, I pictured a future that didn't feel empty. The price was high, but I could afford it. David had made sure of that. His insurance policy wasn't just financial security, it was something he left behind to make sure I would be okay. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would use it not just for myself, but for all of us. I imagined surprising Eric and Samantha, giving them a home where we could all come together again, a place where life could feel full again. But for reasons I couldn't fully explain at the time, I didn't tell them. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that quiet voice again reminding me to move carefully. Either way, I chose to keep it private. I set everything up through a trust, handled the paperwork quietly, and made sure the property was legally mine alone. Renovations began immediately. For 6 weeks, I lived my life as if nothing had changed, while behind the scenes, I was preparing something I truly believed would bring our family closer together. Every detail in that house was chosen with intention. The kitchen was redesigned, the floors restored, the walls repainted. I thought about what they would like, how they would react, how happy they would be. I imagined the moment I would finally reveal everything: the surprise, the gratitude, the relief. I thought I was building something meaningful, but what I didn't realize was that they had already started seeing it as something they deserved. One Saturday morning, Eric called, his voice full of excitement. He told me they had found the perfect house, a Victorian on Maplewood Avenue. My hand tightened around the phone. It was the same house. For a moment, I almost laughed, thinking this was the perfect opportunity to reveal everything. But then his tone shifted. He said the price was too high, he said they couldn't afford it, and then he asked if I could help with a down payment. He called it an early inheritance. That word stayed with me. Inheritance, not help, not support, not partnership, expectation. Later that day, we visited the house together. Samantha walked through it like she already owned it. She pointed at the garden, describing what she would plant. She ran her fingers along the kitchen counters I had chosen, already imagining her gatherings. Then she walked into the master bedroom, the one I had prepared for myself, and said something that I will never forget. "This would be perfect for us. You can take the smaller room down the hall." I smiled, I nodded, but inside something shifted permanently. They weren't asking, they were deciding. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. This wasn't going to be seen as a gift. It was going to be taken as something they believed they were entitled to, and that realization changed everything. The next morning, Eric called again, and this time there was a sense of urgency in his voice that I hadn't heard before. He spoke quickly, almost as if he was trying to guide the conversation before I had a chance to think. He told me another buyer was interested in the house on Maplewood Avenue. He said we needed to act fast or we would lose it. Then, without even pausing, he suggested wiring the money immediately and letting Samantha handle the process because she understood these things better. I didn't respond right away. I just listened, and in that silence, something inside me became very clear. They weren't trying to help me, they were trying to control the situation. I told him calmly that I would speak to the realtor myself before making any decisions. The silence on the other end of the phone was immediate and noticeable. It wasn't confusion, it was discomfort. He wasn't expecting that answer. After a few seconds he agreed, but his tone had changed. It was tighter, less confident. And that's when I knew for sure this wasn't about timing and it wasn't about opportunity. It was about access. That same afternoon, I contacted the property manager and asked them to relist the house publicly just to observe what would happen. I didn't explain why, I simply wanted to see how far things had already gone behind my back. Within hours, Eric called again. This time, his tone had shifted completely. He told me the other buyer had backed out unexpectedly and the house was available again. His urgency returned, even stronger than before, as if he was trying to push me back into the same position. But now, I was no longer reacting. I was watching. And when you start watching carefully, the truth reveals itself in ways you can't ignore. The following day, I decided to drive past the property one more time before officially moving in. I didn't tell Eric or Samantha, I just wanted a quiet moment to myself to see the house, to feel certain about my decision. But as I turned onto Maplewood Avenue, something immediately caught my attention. Samantha's car was parked right outside the house. I slowed down, my hands tightening slightly on the steering wheel. At first I told myself there must be an explanation. Maybe she was meeting the realtor. Maybe Eric had arranged something, but as I got closer I saw her standing near the front porch with another couple. She was smiling, gesturing toward the house, speaking with confidence. I pulled over quietly, just far enough to observe without being noticed, and then I saw it clearly. She was showing them the house, not casually, not uncertainly, confidently, like she owned it. She pointed toward the windows, explaining features. She walked them up the steps, describing details I recognized, details I had personally chosen during renovation. Then she turned, reached into her purse, and pulled out a key. My breath caught in my throat as I watched her slide it into the lock, and this time it worked. The door opened. For a moment, everything around me felt completely still. I didn't move, I didn't react. I just sat there, watching something I couldn't ignore anymore. I had never given her a key. No one had. The only keys that existed were with me and the property manager, which meant there was only one explanation left. She had made a copy, and that meant this wasn't just assumption anymore. This was planning. I didn't confront her right away. I didn't step out of the car or make a scene. Instead, I drove away slowly, my mind clearer than it had been in days, because now I wasn't dealing with uncertainty anymore. I wasn't guessing. I knew exactly what was happening, and more importantly, I knew I needed to handle it carefully. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I contacted a locksmith and had every lock in the house replaced the very next morning, not just the front door, all of them, every entry point. I also arranged for a full security system, including cameras at every angle of the property. It wasn't about fear, it was about control. If someone was going to try to take something from me, I was going to make sure I saw it coming. And that brings me back to that moment, the one I saw on my phone the next morning. Samantha standing at the door, trying to use a key that no longer worked, frustration on her face, confusion in her movements. Panic just beginning to settle in, because in that moment, for the first time, she realized something had changed. She wasn't in control anymore. After her failed attempts at unlocking the door, she stepped back and called Eric immediately. I watched the entire thing unfold in real time. Her body language was sharp, irritated. She kept pointing at the lock, shaking her head, pacing back and forth. Eric must have been asking questions because she gestured repeatedly, clearly trying to explain something that no longer made sense. And then something interesting happened. She looked around, not casually but carefully, as if she suddenly realized she might be seen. That's when I knew she understood the situation more than she was letting on. She wasn't confused, she was caught. I didn't call her, I didn't call Eric. Instead, I waited. Because sometimes the best way to understand someone's true intentions is to give them just enough time to reveal them on their own. Later that afternoon, Eric called me. His tone was different again, controlled but slightly tense. "Mom," he said, "did you change the locks on the house?" I paused for a moment before answering. "Yes," I said calmly. There was silence. Then he spoke again, more carefully this time. "Why would you do that without telling us?" Us, that word stood out immediately. I kept my voice steady. "Because it's my house," I replied. "And I didn't realize I needed permission." Another silence. This one longer. He tried to recover quickly, saying they were just trying to help, that Samantha had gone by to check on the property, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the tone in his voice wasn't convincing anymore. It wasn't confident, it was defensive, and for the first time I didn't feel emotional listening to him. I felt certain. "I think it's best," I said calmly, "if we take a step back from all of this." He didn't argue, not immediately, but I could feel the shift. The control they thought they had was slipping, and they didn't know how to get it back. Over the next few days, things became quiet, too quiet. No visits, no casual calls, just short, careful conversations that felt forced, and that silence told me more than anything else could have. Because when people can no longer manipulate a situation, they don't always confront it, they retreat. But I wasn't retreating, I was moving forward. I finalized everything with the house and officially moved in on my own terms. No announcements, no surprises, just a quiet transition into something that was fully mine. The first night I spent there alone felt different, not lonely, not heavy, just peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control over my life again, not because everything was perfect, but because I had finally drawn a line, a boundary that should have been there from the beginning. And that's when I understood something I hadn't fully realized before. Grief doesn't just make you vulnerable, it makes you visible to the wrong people. And if you're not careful, they won't just step into your life, they'll try to take it over. Eric and Samantha still call sometimes. The conversations are polite, distant, controlled. Things will never go back to the way they were, and honestly, I don't want them to, because what happened showed me something I can't unsee. Trust isn't about who's closest to you, it's about who respects your boundaries when they have the chance to cross them. And sometimes the moment you finally say no is the moment you see people for who they really are.